Welcome to the third and final lesson in this little mini series of 3 video lessons that we've put together. So far, if you've seen videos 1 and 2, you'll know that we've covered the upstream dead drift method with a very simple mobile hackled wet fly pattern. We've looked also at how you can potentially use stiff hackled wet flies to actually anchor that fly in the water and stretch out your casting line. We focused very much on the kind of high rod tip angle, casting line held off the water right the way up to the fly and how effective that is. We've also seen, courtesy of John's great demonstration, the effectiveness of pulsation and how manipulating and moving the fly, particularly when it's paired with the design of the hackle that is incredibly mobile as well, and shown how that's a fantastically effective method of turning unresponsive fish into basically a red letter day. We're able to catch a lot of fish.
It can work as well, that little change. But I think something else that we looked at that I'd like to touch on, we talked about how a close copy fly can be too closely sort of...
Yeah, I mean, that's where we left that lesson too, I think.
You know, we are getting into the territory of where flies almost become art. You know, you see some amazing close copies where they are as much for its own sake as they are for anything to do with catching fish. It, you know, springs to mind some of the stonefly nymphs that you see that have got every single part of the wing case.
And they're amazing things, you know, literally are pieces of art.
But even in things where you replicate the exact number of tails and you have a pair of wings and 6 legs, these flies are getting too close. Fish can't count to 6. They can't count that there's 3 tails. These things can actually be working against you, both in the way that they don't trigger what the fish is looking for, but also mechanically they don't fish as well as a more simply tied pattern.
I mean, I've sort of had this thing that, you know, if you tie a copy that's so good it blends in, you know, to the naturals, you're making that fish sort of choose between your fly and the naturals potentially, which can actually, you know, reduce that effectiveness by being too good.
Yeah, that's assuming that it sits right and casts right. If you think about some of these, you know, the split wing flies, when you cast them, especially on fine tippets, a lot of the times they can spin like a propeller and you can end up with a kinked up tippet. So you're constantly fighting kind of, you know, tangled up tippet and things in a complete mess. Or the thing wants to flop on its side and not sit at the right attitude. So you get this thing that in the vise looks very real, but when you transplant it out into nature, it fails at actually sitting right in the water.
So here's the thing for me. I mean, in the demonstrations that we've given, you know, we've flagged up 3 separate patterns, if you like, that have got slightly different functional features. We're talking very much about functional flies. So I'd kind of throw out the question to people that are a bit skeptical about this, you know, I thought close copy fly tying was the way to go for catching fish. I mean, let's skip over the fact that when you look in a competition angler's box, you know, you don't find them full of like absolutely perfect close copy imitations. But just based on the 3 patterns that we've looked at, and you know, if we take those 3 flies as an example, what is it about the different hackle types on each of those 3 flies? You know, and I'd ask the question, is it that, you know, the soft pheasant hackle in the pattern that you were using, does that make it a better imitation and, you know, more like food than the other ones? Or is it that for each of the presentation styles that we used in the demonstrations that we gave, is it that you know, the actual construction of the fly allows you to have that function and sort of bring out the best in your presentation?
If you remember in the second of these videos, I talked about the very simple equation for flies, and I think all of those 3 flies tick the boxes.
Yeah.
Body that's longer than it is fat, and sticky out bits.
I was steady on with the technical jargon.
Yeah, but that is pretty much what a fish is looking for. That's what most insects are ticking boxes for.
Yeah.
And it's what, if you look back through as many historic patterns as you can, you'll find that equation fit, that you can overlay that over pretty much every fly pattern in history.
It's remarkably consistent. Yeah. And I think the benefit of us having sort of that biological background, it lets us see that and then apply it.
Yeah.
But the thing that we actually boil it right down to the constituent parts, which is once it's ticked that recognition of, food, there's then other things that the fly can do for you. And it then starts being useful to think about, well, what does the part does the fish play in this equation? Because basically, I'm going to say all of fishing, never mind all of fly fishing, but certainly all of fly fishing comes down to the fact that the fish wants to eat something without itself being eaten.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, it's not easy to achieve that, but if you can do those two things, you can present something that is convincingly perceived as food, and you don't scare the living daylights out of the fish while you're doing it, you will be a very successful fly angler.
Those two things are, from a biological science's point of view, they are kind of fundamental instinctive reactions where they will be triggered off and there's no conscious thought from the fish on that. It will either have an instinct to feed on what it sees, or it will have an instinct to flee from what it's perceived. And you can't switch that on or off in the fish, but you can use the instinct to feed as a way to get it to take your fly, and you can learn about the things that trigger it to flee so that you don't do them.
Yeah.
And they are very simple systems, and it's as biological scientists and teachers, we wanted to come up with a set of sort of guidelines, rules, a system, so that we can pass on these tricks, so you can use simple flies to target fish and have great success without triggering off these flight responses.
And again, what I do want to emphasise is we've majored, as most material does, we've majored on the fact of convincing the fish that it's food. But that's because there's a lot of material out there that talks about close copy stuff.
Yeah.
What I do want to flag up is that a functional fly can help the angler just as much with helping to avoid spooking, spook the fish that you're trying to catch. A functional fly will help you just as much with that as it will with the imitation side of things as well. So it's that critical kind of
the wrong fly can spook a fish.
Yeah.
And that is very demonstrable.
Exactly. And then layering it on top of that, you've got the idea that you need to stand out a bit sometimes rather than being too good of a copy.
Yeah, something that screams pick me. I am the juiciest, I am the sweetest, I am the best one, I'm the biggest mouthful.
The most vulnerable, the most available.
Yeah.
But even you can see, even with a super simple fly that is thread and hackle, the things we've just spoken about there's 3 or 4 moving parts there, but it gets pretty complex. It gets pretty overwhelming if you're not careful. That's why over this amount of time that we've come up with a system that not only works for us, and we've tested it in competitions and all sorts of things like that, but we've shown that we can teach it to other people as well, and they can become successful using that sort of the methodology that we've come up with.
We've tested it around the world as well, from the mountains of Japan, the Italian Alps, the Czech Republic, the streams where Czech Nymphium was born and bred, all over our home streams. We've shared it with people all over the globe, from sort of Australia to the Americas. Really, all around Europe, we get reports from people that have upped their catch rate using this information.
And it's, again, those sort of reports back saying that it actually massively increased the confidence of people when they've kind of picked up the simple system that they can apply. It means they can go anywhere, to rivers anywhere in the world, and have complete confidence that, at least if they don't come back with many fish, they know that the conditions are really, really hard.
Yeah.
This is not like a silver bullet that's going to be, a perfect solution to every fishing situation. But you know that if there are a few fish to be caught, you're putting yourself absolutely right in, in that sort of, you're throwing your hat in the ring to be amongst the sort of the most successful anglers. But basically the way to cut through all of that complexity, even with this very, very basic fly patterns, it's using the conditions that are driving the fish behaviour to then drive your own presentation, the choice of presentation method. Once you know the presentation method, it's very easy to match the functions of the very simple patterns that you've got. So you can put all of those pieces together, and it is basically responding to the conditions that you find on the day. And that really is a sort of a silver bullet, because it gives you the ability to respond to the moving goalposts. And it's those moving goalposts that provide the frustration of one day, a method that you've kind of mastered, working like crazy, and then you're going back, the next week, the next day, or whenever it is, and something slightly different, and you just don't enjoy the same success, and that gets very frustrating very quickly.
Absolutely the benefit of learning things as a system rather than a single method that's almost static. It's not able to adapt when circumstances change.
So I think we've kind of trailed it enough, and hopefully we've given sort of enough lead in with the lessons and the demos that we've given you that you can use, can pick up and use them straight away. But basically this has all been kind of getting round to the fact that we've managed to boil down that system and put it into a print book version, which it basically, it's not very thick, there's a lot of pictures in it, but what it does is it gives you that simple, straightforward system of being able to respond to conditions that help you pick your method of fishing, and then that also then leads you to the exact ideal pattern that you need to use to make that presentation to the best of your ability.
It gives you a lot to think about when you're tying flies as well, both in what you include, in what you leave out, being prepared for various eventualities, learning about how the actual mechanics of fly design can be used to get better presentations. So by simply changing hackle, you can achieve things that maybe you weren't achieving previously. So there's a lot of real great stuff in there that's not, as far as we're aware, not been shared anywhere else before.
And again, although we use sort of we use Japanese kibari, the flies that Japanese tenkara anglers use, and examples of North Country spiders, Euro nymphing patterns, they're all in this book. I don't for one second want you to go away with the idea that this is only useful for tenkara. Basically, the concept here, if you can't find a way to apply them to your own fishing, whether that's dry fly fishing, wet fly, whatever, any kind of fly fishing on rivers, this is going to give you a real solid basis of how to actually do that and to be successful consistently and have that sort of confidence based on that. But because we've talked about all these details, it might be as if it's a bit overwhelming, and it's like, well, that all sounds like, kind of hard work. And what I would say is that you're free to cherry pick the bits that you want, just as a stepwise fashion. Pick the things that immediately make sense to you and run with those. Because every little element that we've put into the book, on its own is an individual proven tactic and a proven sort of method of improving your success. So even if you only take away 10% of the information that we've put in the book, for me, that it's still well worth actually getting hold of and using that, because it will give you so much more on stream. It'll guide what you do at the fly tying vice if you tie flies. We can also obviously hook you up with the perfect functional patterns as well in the range of kibari that we're developing. Don't fall into that pitfall and make that mistake of thinking that it only applies to tenkara. Tenkara and tenkara flies are a great lens to look through to actually understand the principles. But once you've got the principles, you can apply them across the board to any of the fly fishing that you're doing.
So we've talked about systems, we've talked about all of these concepts, but in this book, what do you actually get? I suppose that's going to be a question in a lot of people's minds. They keep showing us this book, but what is in the book? What I would say, you talked about, if you only took 10% away, you'd be getting your money's worth. And I think you really would. But what I like about the way the book's laid out is the way that it's chaptered. It builds on concepts it introduces, and it never gives you too much information in one go. It's very sort of logical progression. So it starts making you question the way that you've been fishing and the way you think about flies, and then it answers some of those questions that you find yourself asking as you read the book. There are lots of great full colour diagrams in there that really kind of lay out some of the more complex concepts that don't necessarily, some things don't go well in print, and a picture says 1,000 words, as the old saying goes. In addition to that, we've got a whole host. There's something like 220 colour.
There's over
pictures.
220 colour images, and when you think about the combination of that building block approach that you just spoke about there, John, where it does layer it in simple terms. Once you've got that bit, I'm comfortable with that. It then introduces the next building block. But even, like you were saying, even if you were trying to print out 220 odd colour photos in a sort of a bound format, that is going to be a lot more than the price that we're actually asking for this book itself, The other thing that I need to mention about, your photos in there are fantastic, and it shows the level of detail that is needed, because these patterns don't have many elements to them. They're pared down to the pure, raw, lean, functional elements. You need to know what those elements are and how to sort of get the proportions and to look at them in that level of detail. And that macro photography delivers that in spades.
At the end, there's an appendix that features every fly that's mentioned in the book, every single pattern. You get a textbook diagram, basically, full colour. And not only that, you get the dressing for the fly, each of the materials that's in the fly. So if you wanted to just use the book as a time bench reference for tying flies, everything's in there. You can lay it out on the bench and copy any of the flies that you've read about in the instructional part of the book. So for me, it's almost like getting two books in one.
So let's actually get down to what we're offering you today. We're operating under some constraints. We need to let the printer know how many of these to actually run off. So we've got to get that to them by a particular date. So we're going to make this offer that's available to you. Within that, we're going to absorb some of the shipping costs. So we're going to get stung on that for shipping to countries outside the UK. But we're happy to absorb that to give you this kind of all of the abilities, all the information that's in the book. So we'll go ahead now. We're going to lay out exactly what you're going to get for this offer so you can get in and get using the techniques on stream.
If you've followed along with our projects in the past, you'll know that we always like to try and do a special offer for the people that support us. So here it is. We've got the first edition copy of the book, and for everyone ordering before the closing date, you'll get a signed copy by both the authors. And in addition to that, we'll also send you one of the Kibari patterns that was featured in the book. We've also got a fixed price on worldwide shipping. That's a combined total value of over £42 or $54. But if you order before the closing date, not only will you get the special offers, but you'll also save a bit of money too. So this is a time limited offer. We do have to let printers know how many in the first edition print run. So get your pre-order in now. What I would like to say as well, anyone that does decide to sort of get their hands on one of these, you are helping us produce the kind of media that you're watching now. If you've enjoyed the things we do, this is by far the best way to keep that happening and keep supporting us. And we are massively grateful to every single person that decides to purchase some of our paid media.
Yeah, hugely grateful. So if you think that, it sounds like it's worth a gamble to get in on that, I would wholeheartedly say that, it definitely is. Just, the stuff that we've put into it and the way that it's worked for us and our clients, for us it's a no-brainer. So, go ahead and make your pre-order now. What that'll let you do as well is if you're still in the state where you're not quite sure about how to pair the flies with the tactics that we outline in the book, because there's two parts to the book. There's the flies themselves and then there's the presentation methods. If you want the perfect flies to match with those presentation methods, once you've checked out, you'll get an opportunity then actually to get in on some of the DT range that we've handpicked that are explicit. They're featured in the book and they're explicitly paired to all of the methods that we talk about. So without a shadow of a doubt before you get out on stream that you've got the right materials, you've got the information that's correct, you've got the flies that go with it.
It's just a chance to get on the fast track again, isn't it?
Yeah. So please do, if it's the sort of thing that you're into, go ahead and order, and thank you very, very much for your support.
Thank you.